We scream for an hour, them 2 to 3 bullets, they tearing shit up. Don't know nothing about them, I don't know who shot 'em. I heard they came through, they was spraying shit up. Say you got sticks saying what? Hey, nigga, we got sticks saying nuts.
Maurice von Jackson, better known as Lil Nuke, was on the verge of something big. His music was making waves in Columbus, Georgia, and it seemed like the world was finally taking notice. But on September 7th, 2021, everything came crashing down. Maurice, a man full of ambition and talent, became the victim of a betrayal so devastating it would cost him his life. The person who pulled the trigger wasn't a stranger, it was someone Maurice trusted, someone he called a friend. This isn't just another story of jealousy and betrayal. It's the tragic tale of a love triangle that turned deadly. Maurice, his girlfriend, Chana Powell, and his friend Quincy Wade were all caught in a web of emotions, secrets, and lies. What started as a friendship turned into a powder keg, and on that fateful night, it exploded in a way no one could have predicted. In the next few minutes, we'll explore how a friendship turned into fatal hatred and how one man's refusal to accept betrayal led to a decision that would change everything. Maurice von Jackson, or Lil Nuke, was born in 1994 in Columbus, Georgia. Life in Columbus wasn't always easy. The city, with its mix of urban sprawl and southern charm, had its own set of challenges. For Maurice, the odds were stacked against him. But despite the hardships, whether it was the tough environment, the daily struggles of getting by, or the lack of opportunities, Maurice had something that most people didn't: ambition. From an early age, he knew he wanted more. His surroundings might have been filled with obstacles, but Maurice wasn't about to let them define him. He had dreams, big dreams, and a determination to make them a reality. Music became his escape, his outlet to express everything he felt, everything he wanted to say, but couldn't always find the words for in regular life. Through music, he built a world of his own, one where he could channel his frustrations, his hopes, and his experiences into something powerful. Maurice wasn't a household name yet, but he had a presence. Locals knew him as Lil Nuke, a rapper who spoke to the heart of Columbus. His lyrics weren't just words, they were stories. Stories about struggle, pain, and the things that life threw at you when you least expected it. People connected with him because his music felt real. His tracks were raw, honest, and full of life. As his reputation grew, Maurice started getting more attention, not just from his friends, but from the music scene. He'd perform at local venues, grinding every night to build his career. He wasn't quite mainstream yet, but he was on his way. He had the talent, the drive, and the heart. Maurice's apartment at Patriot Place became his base, a place where he'd record tracks and dream big about the future. For him, every song was a step closer to breaking out, to getting out of Columbus and making it big. But as much as he poured his heart into his music, Maurice was also building something that he didn't see coming. The relationships around him, especially with Chana Powell, were becoming more complicated by the day. Maurice wasn't just fighting to make it in the music world, he was fighting to hold onto the life he had built, even as the people closest to him were pulling away. By 2021, Columbus, Georgia, had become a place where danger and opportunity coexisted in a delicate balance. The city, once a quiet corner of Southern tradition, had seen its share of struggles. Homicides were on the rise, and economic hardships weighed heavily on many families. People were fighting just to survive, and for some, survival meant making choices that would forever change the course of their lives. In the midst of it all was Maurice. He was carving his path in a city where the odds didn't seem to be in anyone's favor. He wasn't blind to the struggles around him, but he believed in what he was doing. Music was his way out, his shot at something better, and he was holding on to it tightly. Maurice's home, a modest apartment at Patriot Place, wasn't anything extravagant. It was just a one-bedroom unit tucked away in a complex that wasn't known for luxury. But to Maurice, it was a haven, his space to create and dream. His music filled the small rooms, his thoughts bouncing off the walls of the apartment as he worked tirelessly on his tracks. It wasn't much, but it was his. It was where he built his future, brick by brick. However, that apartment, which had once been a place of hope, would soon become the scene of tragedy. The very walls that had heard his dreams would witness his last moments. Patriot Place wasn't a place for the wealthy or privileged, but it was home to many people doing their best, trying to make it through another day. And in some ways, it felt like the heart of Columbus itself, gritty, determined, and always fighting to stay afloat in a world that didn't always make room for you. The rise in violence that Columbus was experiencing wasn't just numbers on a police report. It was a reflection of the pressure, the tension, and the frustrations of life in a place where the struggle was often real. Maurice was living in that pressure every day, working hard to rise above it. But the forces that were closing in on him weren't just about what he could do for his career, they were about the people around him, the relationships he thought he understood, but which were slipping through his fingers. The rise in crime in Columbus mirrored the personal battles Maurice was facing, struggles that weren't as easily solved as writing a hit song. Maurice's apartment became the backdrop to this dangerous dance. A place of potential and broken dreams, where the line between friendship and violence would blur beyond recognition. It was the kind of setting where every decision could be the one that changed everything, and for Maurice, it was. Maurice and Chana's relationship was one of fire and passion. They were often seen as the couple who couldn't get enough of each other, always together, their chemistry undeniable. On the outside, it looked like any typical young relationship, intense, full of highs and lows, but ultimately bound by love. For Maurice, Chana wasn't just his girlfriend. She was a part of his life, his future. They had their moments, their arguments, but it was clear to him that she was the one who stood by him through everything. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. Behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. Arguments would erupt over the smallest things, like Maurice's late nights spent working in the studio or Chana's friendships with other men. Maurice could feel the tension building, but thought it was just a part of any relationship, especially one with someone as strong-willed and independent as Chana. What he didn't realize, though, was that the tension wasn't just about late-night recording sessions or misunderstandings. There was more to the story. Chana had a past with someone Maurice knew well, Quincy Wade. Quincy Wade, a name Maurice was familiar with, was no stranger to the scene. He didn't have the same dreams as Maurice, though. Where Maurice was focused on making music, Wade bounced around, working various jobs, but never quite finding his place. Wade had a temper, a short fuse that made him unpredictable, and he didn't shy away from letting people know he was in control. While Maurice and Wade were acquainted, they weren't close, but their bond was about to be tested in ways neither man could have foreseen. What Maurice didn't know was that Chana's relationship with Wade didn't end when she started dating him. It wasn't just a past chapter for Chana, it was an unfinished story. Despite her connection with Maurice, Chana still had feelings for Wade. Those feelings didn't just fade away when she moved on. They lingered, unresolved, hanging over her relationship with Maurice like a cloud that she couldn't shake. Wade wasn't just a past lover. He was someone who still had a claim over her heart, or at least that's what he believed. In the summer of 2021, everything changed. Chana found out she was pregnant. The timing was crucial, and the paternity was unclear. Maurice wasn't the only man in her life, and with the way things had unfolded, it seemed as if Wade might be the father. It wasn't a secret Chana could keep for long, especially when the stakes were this high. She was caught in a dilemma, one that no one could have prepared her for. As much as she cared for Maurice, Wade was the biological father of her child, and that fact was something she couldn't ignore. When Chana finally confronted Wade, he didn't take the news well. In fact, it was the spark that set off the dangerous chain of events. Wade wasn't going to let Chana stay with Maurice. He demanded she leave him and be with him instead. Wade didn't see their past as something that could be put behind them. He saw it as unfinished business, something he was willing to fight for, even if it meant tearing apart everything Maurice had built. Chana didn't want to hurt Maurice, but the pressure from Wade, combined with the confusion she felt about her own feelings, left her with little choice. She kept the pregnancy from Maurice, torn between the man she loved and the man who was the father of her child. It wasn't a secret she could hold onto forever, and when Maurice finally found out, the confrontation was inevitable. Maurice felt the weight of betrayal in a way he never could have imagined. Not only was Chana carrying Wade's child, but the man who was supposed to be his friend, someone he had trusted, was now at the center of his personal nightmare. It was a blow that cut deeper than just the surface. It was the kind of betrayal that goes beyond cheating. It was a deep wound to the very foundation of trust. Maurice's anger wasn't just about the pregnancy, it was about the feeling of being blindsided by someone he called a friend. Chana, caught between two men, was now facing the consequences of her choices. Maurice, feeling both hurt and betrayed, didn't back down. He wasn't ready to let go of her, even though everything around them seemed to be falling apart. The tension in their relationship grew, and with each passing day, the situation became more complicated. What started as a love triangle between Maurice, Chana, and Wade quickly turned into something darker, a conflict that could only end in destruction. As the days passed, the tension between Maurice, Chana, and Wade only deepened. Wade wasn't backing down. He had already made it clear that he wanted Chana for himself, and now that he knew she was carrying his child, he wasn't going to let her stay with Maurice. He pressured Chana relentlessly, demanding she leave Maurice and build a life with him instead. Wade was adamant this was his chance to take back what he felt was his. Chana, caught in the middle, tried to keep the peace, but the pressure was mounting. She felt guilty for keeping the truth from Maurice, but at the same time, she was afraid of what would happen if she told him. Wade's persistence was wearing her down. His calls were constant, his texts more aggressive, and every time he showed up uninvited, it was like another blow to the fragile relationship she was holding onto with Maurice. Chana knew she had to make a decision, but every option seemed to push her further away from the life she thought she wanted. Then, the moment Maurice discovered the pregnancy, everything changed. He was furious not just because of Chana's betrayal, but because Wade was involved. The man Maurice had once called a friend had now become his greatest rival. The truth stung in ways Maurice hadn't prepared for. He had trusted Wade, and now he felt like his whole world was collapsing around him. The relationship he'd worked so hard to build with Chana seemed to be slipping through his fingers, and Wade was there, taking every opportunity to remind him of it. Maurice confronted Chana, demanding the truth. He felt betrayed, and the hurt in his voice was clear. It wasn't just about the pregnancy. It was about the lies, the secrecy, and the fact that Wade had been lurking in the background, always a step away from crossing the line. Chana, torn between the two men, tried to explain herself, but the damage had been done. Maurice wasn't hearing it. To him, it was a betrayal on all levels, and the anger that followed was impossible to control. As much as Maurice loved Chana, his pride wouldn't allow him to back down. He wasn't going to let Wade take over his life and his relationship. It wasn't just about the child, it was about respect, loyalty, and trust. Maurice knew that if he didn't stand his ground, Wade would walk all over him. The public confrontations between the two men grew more frequent, and each encounter was more heated than the last. At a local convenience store, things nearly turned physical. Maurice and Wade crossed paths, and it didn't take long for words to turn into threats. People who were there that day later described it as one of the tensest moments they had ever witnessed. Maurice and Wade had been exchanging heated words, almost face-to-face, when their friends stepped in to break it up. It wasn't the first time tempers had flared between them, and it wouldn't be the last. The hostility between them was now visible to anyone who knew them. The text messages and calls between Wade and Chana were becoming even more disturbing. Wade's messages were a mixture of pleading and threats. Some days, he told Chana he couldn't live without her, while on others, he warned her about Maurice. He wanted Chana to see that there was no future with Maurice, no way that they could all coexist. The messages Wade sent to Maurice weren't any better. They were filled with threats and anger, demanding Maurice step aside. Wade wasn't just trying to control Chana anymore. He was trying to control the situation entirely. Maurice, for his part, wasn't backing down. As the messages got worse, he confided in his friends about how much he was starting to fear for his safety. He felt that Wade was pushing him into a corner, but Maurice wasn't about to let him win. Maurice was a fighter, and he'd fought too hard to get where he was to let someone like Wade take it all away. But even as Maurice refused to back down, he couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling of danger. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and he knew that sooner or later, something would have to give. What Maurice didn't realize was that the very thing he feared, Wade's unpredictable behavior, was about to come to a head. Wade had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and Maurice's refusal to step aside only made him more determined to get what he wanted. The stage was set, and no amount of fighting, no amount of words would stop what was coming next. September 7th, 2021, started off like any other day for Maurice. He'd been out, meeting with a local producer, talking about an upcoming track, something that could potentially push his career to the next level. He returned home later that evening, his mind still on the music, but as he entered his apartment, all of that quickly faded. He was ready to relax, to be with Chana, his girlfriend, the woman he had built so much with. After a long day, all he wanted was a quiet night in. Chana arrived shortly after Maurice, bringing some takeout food with her. The evening was calm at first, a peaceful end to what had been a hectic day. They shared a quiet dinner together, the kind of moment that could have easily been overlooked in the chaos of life, but in retrospect would become one of their last peaceful moments together. They posted a picture on social media,